Hey everybody, welcome back if you have been following along. And if you're watching this for the third time, keep at it, you'll get it. If you have just joined us, hello, my name is Adam Heath. I work with the Navarre Family Center for Digital Scholarship at the University of Notre Dame. And if you have gotten here by accident, we're learning SketchUp today. And where we left off in our last recording is that we had just set up this matched photo view pardon me, which we can access by hitting this tab up here to the right. You'll see I actually have two tabs, one of which I was practicing earlier on, and I'm going to get rid of this scene just by right-clicking and hitting delete. And yes, I'm going to get rid of that one. So the next stage of what we want to do is to go ahead and start adding these porches. And I say porches plural. And I know that I want to start making multiple copies of things. This is the only central chunk of our building, but we have more than one porch that we want to make. We have more than one window that we want to make. And if you remember, when we right-clicked on grabbing something, and I think maybe the first video or the second video, with the option for make a group or make a component. I want to talk more about this because the decision to make a group and make a component is the first step into leveraging multiples of geometry that we make. So first thing I'm going to do is right-click and say, make a group. Now I have this middle chunk, and he's a group. I'm going to hide it, and I'm going to get rid of all the rest of this stuff. We've talked about it a couple of times, and we don't need it anymore. Now I'm going to hit Edit, Unhide, Last. So I brought him back. We're going to start off by making this porch. And once again, I know that a lot of these things have the right terminology for them, but if I say porch, whether you're a math student, an engineering student, social sciences, history, or architecture, I think we can all understand that this is kind of like a porch that sticks off the house. We're going to make a number of these. And the reason we talk about groups versus components, I'm going to come on over here to kind of our scratch space. And we're going to go ahead and just make a square there. 1, 2, 3. Right click, make it a group. Now, if I make a couple of these in a row, I'm going to do that using what's called an array. Now, when we were moving our diagrams, when we were first setting up some of the different views we could do, I told you if you had the Move tool selected and you tapped Control, that you could select that little plus sign on there. We're toggling off and on. I'm going to toggle on that plus sign. I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to move it, and when I move it, I'm leaving one there. Now what happens is what I'm doing is I'm starting something in SketchUp called an array. Once I drop this down, if I don't do anything, and in the bottom right hand corner you'll see the keys that I'm pushing, I'm going to hit times 4. So for me that's actually going on the keypad going to be asterisk 4, and hit enter. And you can see what I've told it is make a copy and move it this far. Now do that 4 times. I have the same opportunity if I take one. So let's take this guy, tap Control, move him to where we want the last one to be, and when I drop it, I'm going to hit divide by 4. So I hit divide or the slash 4 and hit enter. So I've taken the distance from the first one to the last one I put, and I divided that into 4 different groups. You could say I've added 4 instances of copy, or I made 4 spaces in between. So those are 2 ways that we can make an array, and it gives us the opportunity to duplicate content that we've already made. I'm going to do the same thing here, but instead of making it a group, I'm going to make it a component. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. I'm going to right click and say make a component. I have a number of other things that are happening here, but we'll get into that in a second. I'll just hit create. Now I'm going to make an array again, and I'm going to move it, and I'm going to say divide by 5. And I have a bunch of them again. I've got 5 copies. Or I've taken the distance and I've split it into 5 spaces. If I go into my group and I say edit, everything else is grayed out, and I can make adjustments to that group, which is fantastic. Now I can come back out of it. But if I go into my component and say edit component, you can see that these guys are entirely grayed out. Because when I modify one of them, I modify all of them. So if I were to say make a group, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of shrink wrapping all of that geometry, and I can make copies of it. When I say make a component, I'm doing the same thing, but all of these are linked through the same definition. So you can say here this is just a bunch of rectangles. But if I make a component, maybe this component is not just a rectangle. Maybe it actually has an identity. Maybe it's door number 1. And every time I have a copy of door number 1, I have the exact same geometry. And every time I modify any of door number 1, it modifies all of door number 1. So if you're thinking of just putting some placeholder geometry into a model, you can get away with a group and it will do what you want it to do. If we're going to put some geometry in that we might want to change later or tweak or update, and we want all of those duplicates to update, we're going to want to use components. And that's how we're going to proceed with making this porch. So let's go ahead and draw a rectangle from, actually, let's put in a reference. It's always nice to have a little bit of a reference. Let's go into this group, and we're going to float over the midpoint of this line. And SketchUp will, as it always does, try to guess where we are. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line down on the front. So now my central chunk includes a midline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw a rectangle from somewhere on that middle line down to the front edge. Okay? So if I go ahead and hide this big guy, let's hide him. You can see I've drawn a rectangle that's the equivalent of half of the porch, the right-hand side of the porch. And we'll do a little bit more in a second. And you can see that that halfway line lines pretty well up with the midpoint of that door on the front face, which is good. It means we're pretty close to what we want to do. Now I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to duplicate it. 1, 2, 3. Tap my move tool, hit Control, and I'll shift it on over. So I've just made a duplicate of it. Now that I made a duplicate, I'm going to go ahead and erase that line. Now if I'm going to go ahead and say Edit, Unhide Last, you can see now I have a rectangle that is exactly in the middle of this big block. And I'm going to take that rectangle and pull it out. So I'm generating the main mass of that porch. So I'm just going to pull it out to anywhere. I'm just going to leave it right there. Obviously a little too far, but that's okay for us. Let's take the front edge of this porch and let's pull it back to where it lines up pretty close to where we want to be. And what I want to do is I want to line up to the pretty close to that front corner. Now if I pull up, you can see I'm kind of a little bit too wide, and that's okay. I'll take this side in and I'll pull it in a little bit. I'll back out and I'll come around to this side and I'll double click. And if you remember from the first time we dealt with the push and pull tool, it remembers how much we pushed the first time and it'll duplicate that on the second time. Now obviously I'm a little too tall. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do another thing, and this is a feature of the matched photo that we set up in one of the other videos, is I'm going to click on the top just once, tap, and now I've locked onto that top of that porch. I can pull it way up or way down as far as I need to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the tab, and you can see even though I can't see the top, I'm still connected to the top of that porch. So I'm just going to pull this down to where I'm pretty close to where the sides turn that corner and they start generating that overhang. So I'm happy with what's happening so far. And let's go ahead and at this point, let's see if we can come up and draw a line across. And let's see what happens if we try to pull these stairs out. We can get pretty close to where those stairs are. Now, what we can see is this side of our porch gets wider towards the base. That's okay. What we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and draw a line across. And we'll draw another line across. And we'll just pull that a little wider. Now, how wide? I don't know. So I'll just grab it and I'll lock onto it. I'll go back to my view. And then I will just go ahead and pull it till it feels like I'm getting pretty close. So you can see I'm just added a little bit of depth to the side. Double click on this side, and I'm pretty set with where I want to be. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to triple click, 1, 2, 3, right click, and I'm going to make this a component. I'm going to call this component porch. I'm going to hit create. So now I've made a component of the porch. And what I want to do is I want to put it on all 4 sides of this main massing. And I'm going to do that before I keep on doing some more modeling. Now, when we were duplicating things here in these arrays, we were moving things along a centralized line. But let's say we want to take, and let's move this guy up. Let's grab him and make him let's make him a group for now. And let's say instead of moving this on a straight line, like we did with the move tool, saying divide by 2, what if I wanted to take this and rotate it so that it faced around a perimeter? I can do that with my rotate tool. And what I want you to consider is that rotating something is moving it. But instead of maintaining a singular line of direction, we're maintaining a singular point of rotation. So I can go ahead and tap Control, and you'll see that now my rotate tool, I have to move it so this pop-up doesn't float over it. My rotate tool toggles off and on between rotate and rotate plus. And if I hit, I click my mouse button, now I can rotate a duplicate of that around that central point. And I can just say times 3. And now I have all 4 of those components. I'm going to do the same thing with my porch. The first thing I need to do is find that point that I'm rotating around. And to do that, I'm just going to draw a diagonal line across the top of my square. I'll click on my porch. I'll tap the rotate tool. I'll float over the midpoint of this diagonal line. I'll tap Control. And now as I rotate it around, I can get to our rotate at 90. And once again, I can kind of freewheel it and type it in. I can hopefully lock in along that green axis. Or I can use these hashes to lock in my rotation to 15-degree increments. In either way, I'm able to get to 90. So I'll click and I'll drop that one. And I'll hit times 3. And now I have the beginnings of my porch on all 4 sides. I'm going to show you what happens if we go in here and do a little bit more work. Let's say we're going to go ahead and add in, let's add in a little pushback here. I'm going to double click on that component, and that gets me the opportunity to edit it. Now I can, before you saw me right click and say edit component. Right clicking and hitting edit component is the same as just double clicking on my component. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a line just across the front. And now I can push back. I'm going to zoom out a little bit as I do this. You can see as I'm pushing back on this one, you can see I was also pushing back on that one on the side. So I can start making a lot of these adjustments on every one of those components just by working on one of them. And that's the beauty of deciding that you wanted to do a component versus a group. So let's go ahead and leave that right there. I have a couple of more things that need to happen here. I have all of these columns that I'm going to want to put in, and I have to put this little pediment peak on top there. I also have some steps that I need to push in. The steps I can do with a component as well. what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and stop where we are now so that you can try just these few steps. I'm going to come back into our next video with some of these components already made, and then I'll walk you through how I did that. And we'll start with those columns.